To review, the Mishnah had 4 cases. What was the first case?
Come on, it's mine.
It's mine. Okay, 2 people fighting over Tallis. He says it's mine, he says it's mine, but they also both first said, I found it. Good. Second case?
At least.
Second case, before we talk about the ruling. Second case was, one guy says, it's all mine. One person says, half of it is mine. Okay. Third case, 2 people arguing over an animal, either both riding or one riding and one leading. Final case in the Mishnah?
You don't need an oath.
Okay, that's the ruling. So what's the case?
Witnesses.
If they're witnesses, or if they both admit that actually it's a fair split between them. Okay, now the rulings. We have one ruling that applies to 2 of the cases. We have the same ruling for the 2 people saying, I found it and it's mine with a tallis, as with the 2 people arguing over the animal. What's that ruling?
Half and half.
First, you have to take an oath that no less than half is yours, and then we divide it half and half, and basically what that means is we sell the asset and split the profits. Second ruling, the guy says it's all mine versus the guy says half is mine. What's the ruling?
Split a quarter.
But
Acknowledge a quarter.
first, you've got to take an oath. So the first person has to take an oath that no less than 3/4 belongs to him. And the other guy has to take an oath that no less than a quarter. And then we split according to the words of their oath. The third ruling that we had, which was for the 4th case, if they are witnesses or they both acknowledge, then what do? Split without an oath. Without an oath. Okay, so what that tells us over here, obviously, is that one of the key things we're going to have to explore is the nature of the oath, which we're going to get to. We're not there yet. The first question that the Gemorah asked was, why do I have to have what appears to be the same information twice? Because you've told me that 2 people to come into the Beth Din, into the Beis Din, that they're arguing over this tallis that they found, and you're telling me, this guy says I found it, this guy says I found it. Then you're telling me that this guy says it's all mine, and this guy says it's all mine. Why do you have to say 2 different scenarios? So that is our first question. We're not done with that question yet. We're still exploring that question. The first answer that we suggested for that question was?
Physically happened.
No.
Repeat the question.
Okay, so the question was, why is the Mishnah apparently telling me the same information twice? I found it versus I found it. It's mine versus it's mine. Surely it's the same information. Why does it have to tell it to me twice? So what was our first suggested answer? Was that actually it's telling us a single scenario, because it's just a scenario with 2 parts. Part 1 of the scenario is I found it, and it's mine. Second part of the scenario. Okay, that's our first suggestion of how to answer this. Okay, great. Then we had a different question, and this is where we are. We're in the midst of this different question. So just to give you an indication where we are. So if you have a look at the actual Gemorah page, you would have seen that in the Gemorah there are highlights in orange. Those highlight the questions. So that would have been now at the 3rd highlighted word, which is the word velisni. On our handouts, on our note pages, that would have been the second proposed review of the Mishnah. Okay, so what was the question? The second question that we asked? Okay, fine. So now you're telling me it's one scenario. In that scenario, each guy is saying, I found it and it's mine. So what was the next obvious question? If each person is saying, I found it and it's mine, what's the question? Why do you have to say it's mine? Once you said you found it, surely that's good enough? Surely that's good enough? You said I found it. What else did you mean when you said I found it? Obviously, you're arguing that it's yours. So to that, the Gemorah gave an answer which was, this is really important, we have to know exactly what that answer was because it's directly related to what we're going to be learning tonight. So first of all, that answer was not a direct answer. It was an answer that had to be built. The way that it was built was using a Hava Amina principle. So let's remind ourselves, what is a Hava Amina?
I would have thought it would be.
Correct. A Hava Amina is an hypothesis that will be disproven. That's what a Hava Amina is. It's a hypothesis that would have been disproven. Just in case there's anybody around the table who's not first language English. So hypothesis means the original thought that I had, and then after that, that thought is rejected. So here's what the Gemorah said. The Gemorah said, if, now remember, this is really important. I know that we spoke about it last week, but it's really important to reiterate. The Gemorah is not debating what words the actual people said in the actual case in the Beis Din. The Gemorah is debating which words the Mishnah wants to use to define the legal parameters of the case. Does that make sense? In other words, there's no script for what people say when they come to court. People say all kinds of things when they come to court. And there's no way that the Mishnah is going to cover every permutation of what people are going to say when they come to court. The scenario that the Mishnah uses, the words that it's choosing are there to teach us maximum information with minimum words. So, when the Gemorah asks the question, why did you have to say it's all mine if you already said I found it? It's not saying why did the guy who came to the base din have to say that. It's saying why did the Mishnah determine that in order to have a legal claim, you need to be able to have both of these elements to your claim. You have to be able to say I found it, and you have to be able to say it's all mine. Surely if a guy says it's all mine, he means if a guy says he found it, he means it's all mine. So to answer that, the Gemorah built this Hava Amina, which was, had the Mishnah only defined the legal terminology as I found it, we would have misunderstood what finding means. So what would we have thought that finding means? That you saw it. Exactly. You would have thought that the minute a guy sees something, he has the right to go to the courts and say, I found it first. Therefore, the Mishnah said, we want to tell you the formula for an acceptable argument in the courts is not I saw it. It's not I found it. It has to be I found it and it is mine. It is mine means I actually have it. Okay. Now, before we proceed, I just want to show you something inside the actual Gemorah sheet. Okay, so just turn for a second to the actual Gemorah sheet.
Why would it make it leap to say, I saw it? No. There's nothing that suggests that says...
Okay,
I
so...
was thinking about the same thing. Because he didn't say, I went and picked it up. He said, I found it. So you would think that he's looking at it.
But you don't find something...
Well, let's talk about that. No, this is a very good point. This is a very good point. So let's talk about real life scenarios. Did you see that thing the other day with the guy who grabbed the cat? The hat, right? The tennis, right?
Yeah.
So you look at that and you think, on camera, right? I mean, the CEOs are getting taken out on public cameras lately. Stay away from public events. Anyway, so you watch the scene. I mean, it's an incredible scene, right? Here's a guy who literally grabs the cap out of the kid's hand and puts it in his shopping bag. Yes, the athlete gave it to the kid. Yeah. And then the guy who's like this big deal CEO just feels entitled to take it. Now, that's outright theft, right? It's outright theft. Nobody would debate that. And those kinds of things happen frequently in these kinds of sporting games, particularly in baseball. You often see that with a ball, right? There's somebody who catches the ball and then somebody else tries to somehow get the ball. So it's very clear. There's no question about it. Once somebody has something in their possession, that's it. Legally, they now have the rights to it. And anybody who does anything from that moment and on is, without question, a ganef. There's no debates. But let's say it was a slightly different scenario. Let's say that the guy hits the ball and it goes into the stands. And there are two people sitting on either side of where the ball lands. And obviously they're not both going to go for this ball, right? And one of them gets it and the other one doesn't. It's not far-fetched for the guy who doesn't get it to say, that's not right. I saw that it landed there before you did. In fact, the only reason you went to get it is because you saw me looking in that direction. Like, people actually do use that line of argument. The point is, it's not valid. It has no legal basis. But the reality is people think that way. People think that they have a claim to something if they made an approach to it before they actually got there, if they spotted it first. To make it a little bit more flippant, but, when you're with your kids in the bush, then there's an argument about who spotted the leopard, right? For the bragging rights. Like, it's actually a real thing in human psychology, that people think that if I saw something first, that gives me some kind of rights to it. And the Mishnah needs to make it absolutely clear that that's nonsense, that there is no such concept as visual rights. Rights are physical. You've actually got to hold it in your hand. So you're right. None of us believes that should have legal footing until we're the person in that situation.
But I think Charlie's question is different. Why would you have thought he looked at it?
Oh, no. I don't. Are you asking why you think he would have looked at it?
I am actually asking that. Yeah. Well, why did it come up with that concept of I saw it?
Okay, so let's use it.
As opposed to I'm trying to think of, or I don't know what else it could do.
Okay, so let's make a more extreme version of the story because it will help, right? So two guys walking on the road from two different directions. Okay, walking the road two different directions. Next thing, this wad of money just falls out of a tree. Okay, because it falls out of an apartment. You can't exactly take it. So this wad of money falls out of a tree. Boom, right in front of them. And the one guy's walking with a friend. He says to his friend, look at that, there's money over there. The other guy hears that, and he runs and takes the money. Now the guy says, but you would never have known the money was there unless I had pointed it out. I wasn't pointing it out to you, I was pointing it out to my friend. But the fact is, I saw it. I'm the one who became aware of it first. What gives you the right to take it? And we're going to say to this person, listen, we feel terrible for you, but legally, that doesn't count.
Then why did the Mishnah say, I saw it?
No.
Word
Because the Mishnah wants to clarify for us that seeing does not count. That's exactly the point. The Mishnah wants to avoid the word seeing because the Mishnah wants us to know that legally sight is not a means of acquisition. That's what the Mishnah wants us to know. Therefore, it's using the word I found it. Why found? We're still going to see why that's important. It'll be in the next piece. Why it had to say found. But right now what we're clarifying is why you had to say it's all mine, because it's all mine means I had a legal acquisition. I made a kinyan as opposed to laying claim to something just because I noticed it. Okay? So that's where we ended off last week, is that we don't want to have a scenario where a person is going to believe that they have the rights to something just because they saw it. Therefore, the Mishnah uses language that moves us away from that. Now, if you have a look at the actual Gemorah page, you'll see that I highlighted a few Rashis. We're not yet at the point that we're going to do many Rashis, but just want to highlight, it's the fourth blue highlight on the right-hand side of the page, because Rashi is in this on this page on the right-hand side, is always the inside column. So the fourth highlight, you see that? The fourth highlight down. This is where the Gemorah said, Tano Kula Sheli, that the Mishnah specifically added the words Kula Sheli, that it's all mine. So you see there's just two words over here that are highlighted, which is the implication of Kula Sheli, that it's all mine, is Be Chazaka Gemorah, that I have a complete Chazaka. Now we already spoke a little bit about what Chazaka is. Does anybody remember what Chazaka is?
Ownership.
I thought it said something happens 3 times.
Okay, that's one means of
Hold on, I'll
achieving
tell you
a Chazaka. Okay, so that's just a method that doesn't tell you what a Chazaka is. So what is a Chazaka?
Finding it.
Okay, so finding something is not a chazaka, that's a method to achieve a chazaka. What is chazaka? It's what?
Ownership.
Yeah, so chazaka does not equal ownership. Chazaka comes from the word chazak, strong, which means I now have a strong claim on something. So chazaka Gemorah, the most complete claim that a person can have to something is, I made an acquisition, I made a kinyan, it's mine. That is the strongest chazaka that a person can have. So I'm just pointing that out because Rashi wants us to understand that it's not some kind of a flippant, ethereal, oh, I saw it, so therefore already I deserve it. Nonsense. Till it's in your hand, it's not yours. Till you have a true chazaka, it's not yours. So far, so good. However, the Gemorah is about to launch a kashya against that answer. So let's look at the flow. The flow was, we asked a shaila, we asked a question. The question was, it could have skipped the words kula sheli and just said that each guy comes claiming I found something. We had an answer to that. It was a complex answer, which is built in a havamina, which says, well, you couldn't have said that because then it would have misled us into believing that maybe you could claim something just because you've seen it. So we've left off now saying that had I read the Mishnah, this is very important to knowing what's going on in the next piece. We left off saying that had the Mishnah said, Ani metzasiha, that the claim is I found it, and nothing further, you and I, the readers, would have assumed that one possible way of finding something is just by seeing it. That's how we answered the question. The Gemara is now going to ask a kashya. Now, what does a kashya do?
What does it do?
Yeah.
Challenge.
It challenges, right? So in other words, you've just made a statement. In this case, the statement that you made was an answer to a question. So if we're going to challenge that statement, we're going to say, I don't agree with what you've just said for one of two reasons. Either because I have a logical problem with what you've just said, or because I have a source that gives me different information to what you've just said. So the kasha we're about to learn is the second kind of kasha. Basically, the Gemara is going to say, whoa, hang on a second. You've just made a statement that when I read the word mitzasiha, I found it, I might mistake that to mean I saw it. I'm going to bring you a proof from a source that you could never misinterpret the word that way. Okay, that's the kasha that's coming up. That's the challenge that's coming up. All right. So, in order to get to this challenge, let's have a look at our next sheet. That's the challenge against second review of the Mishnah. See that? The challenge against second review of the Mishnah. All right, before we do the vocabulary and before we do the key phrase, I want to first start off with, can you see there's a quotation over there from the Torah? It's next to that icon with a scroll to illustrate that it's from the scroll. Right? This is a quotation from the Torah. In fact, it's something we actually spoke about previously when we were learning about klal uprat. We actually quoted this pasuk as an example of klal uprat uklal. Right? General principle, then specific principle, then a general principle. So what are we talking about? What is the verse talking about over here? It's talking about the mitzvah of hashavas aveda. What's hashavas aveda? To return a lost object. Now, the examples that we're about to see are unusual examples, some of them, because a lost object does not only mean when something is missing from the owner. There's another variation on the theme of a lost object, very interesting, subject of a massive discussion in Gemorah, which perhaps at some point we'll get to later on, many chapters down the line. But the point is this. Let's say, for example, listen to this as an example. Let's say that I live on a riverbank, and the next thing, there's a flash flood. My neighbor's not home. So he doesn't know that there's this rising water, and he's not there to rescue his assets. Me, I've packed everything up already. I've moved to higher ground. Part of the mitzvah of returning a lost object includes going and saving his stuff from devastation. Okay? So just interesting to understand that. Now, that's going to be relevant to what we're learning over here. So this is the verse. The verse tells us you have to return something that is lost that belongs to somebody else. It says the pasuk, V'chein ta'aseh lachamoroi. That same thing of returning a lost object, v'chein, likewise, ta'aseh, should you do lachamoroi, to his donkey. So if somebody's donkey is lost, you have to return the donkey. V'chein ta'aseh lesim losoi. And so shall you do to his garment. Now that's directly relevant to our conversation, right? Because our Mishnah is about a garment. So that's interesting. Okay, so it says, just as you have an obligation to return other lost objects, so you have an obligation to return somebody's lost donkey, and so you have an obligation to return somebody's lost garment. And so should you do l'chol aveidas achicha, to anything else that your brother, basically your fellow Jew, has lost.
That doesn't make sense to me. Because in our Mishnah, they say they own it, but they don't, because it belongs to someone else.
Hold on, we're going to get there. Okay, we're going to get there, and that's the next piece, which is highlighted. Okay, that's what we're going to see in the next highlighted phrase. Look at the next highlighted phrase. When do you have an obligation to return something to the person who lost it? Asher tovad mimenu, when it is lost from him, umetzasa, and you find it.
So when is it lost by him?
Exactly. When is it lost to him?
Does he have to
Okay,
know about it?
so in other words, and from that we get into the whole conversation around under what circumstances are you allowed to keep a lost object for yourself, because the Torah is very specific over here. It's where it is lost for him, okay, as opposed to lost from others as well.
Mishnah is there.
So this Mishnah must be talking about a case where there's no way to trace it back to him, because there's an appendage over here, right? Lost to him. So if I have no way to trace it back to him, that's when I'm allowed to take it for myself. Okay? So what would be an example, because this is coming up later in the very famous chapter Elam Metzius, which is in 2 chapters' time. So for us that could be a very long way away. But anyway, Elam Metzius talks about scenarios where there are objects that you have to find the owner and there are objects that you're not obligated to find the owner. And the simple message is this. If there's something on this object that I could use to identify the owner, then I have a responsibility to find the owner. It's what we call a siman. A siman means something unique about this object. So for example, cash can never have a siman, because it doesn't matter if you memorize the serial numbers. So what? Doesn't mean I didn't pay somebody with the money just because I memorized the serial numbers. That's nonsense. There's nothing unique about cash. What would be a siman for cash is if it was in a wallet, in an envelope with certain writing on it, etc., etc. Those would be signs that cash belongs to an individual and I can't take it for myself. So our assumption, therefore, in our Mishnah is, if there are two people fighting over this tallis, which we now understand is a cloak, not necessarily a davening tallis, the fact of the matter is, it's got to be a really generic item that nobody could say, oh, this is mine. It's got no specific marks. It's literally got to be a mass production item. Okay? Anyhow, the pasuk continues, Loy suchal lehisalem. You're not allowed to turn a blind eye from an object that you have found. So, let me ask you a question.
They have to do it then.
You got it. You got to return it now, right? Got to return it. Now, if I'm walking down the street and I see that somebody has lost their ox, according to this, I can't turn a blind eye. But I have absolutely no idea how to handle an ox. So the likelihood is, not only will I not end up returning it to him, likelihood is I'll get hurt. Here's another scenario, interesting scenario. This plays a little bit into the Loi Suchali Salem, which the Gemorah later is going to learn that there's actually a bit of a play on words over here. But basically, let's say that it's somebody who is a very important individual in the community, and the method of returning this object would be beneath his dignity. For example, somebody lost their lamb in the street, and the best way to return a lamb is actually to pick it up and carry it through the street. So you can imagine it's now the chief rabbi walking down the street carrying a lamb. It's kind of beneath his dignity, so he's excused. The point of the matter is, not in every scenario that you find a lost object do you have to return it. What we're interested, out of this pasuk, what we're interested in is it's got the word we need. It's got the word we need. What's the word we need? Yeah, correct. Correct, exactly. So it's the word mitzasa. Why? Because, remember, we're asking the question, if the Mishnah said mitzasiha, why is that not good enough? And we answer that by saying, you might misunderstand the word mitzasiha. Well, guess what? Now we have a source that's got the word mitzasiha in it, or mitzasa, which is a variation of the form. It's got the word. So great. Let's go back and look at what the Torah meant when it said find. Then we'll see if your argument works or not. Okay?
Are you saying that the word appears in the Torah in another pasuk somewhere else that has relevance to what we talk about now, in a different context?
Yo, it's the same context. It's about finding things that are lost, which is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about people who found something that is lost, that has no way back to the owner, and now they're trying to claim that they have the rights to it. So it's not only the same word, it's the same context. It's brilliant. It's exactly what we're talking about. Okay? Right, good. So that you get that? So you understand why we're going to be using this source? Because this source is going to be helpful for us to see how the Torah relates to the concept of finding. You're saying that there's a possible misconception that people could think finding means seeing. Let's see what the Torah says. Does the Torah agree with you? Okay, that's where the challenge is coming from. Okay, so that's a very important point of what we're looking to do over here. Now, in order to prepare ourselves for this piece, let's just get some of the vocab. The first word is, it's a very Aramaic word, and that is the word motzi. Motzi, you see that? Motzi, which means able. Able. Okay? Motzi. Next, you know this word, Aleph Mem Reish. What is it? That's a Hebrew word. Say. To say, right? Say. Good. Next word, ha. Now, unfortunately, in Aramaic, this could have two meanings. Right now, we're just going with one of the meanings. And ha is bat. Bat. Okay? Not to get confused with the Pesach Seder, where we say ha lachma anya. And there, the word ha means this. So sometimes the word ha means this. Sometimes the word ha means bat. Usually, if it's got a vav before and ver-ha, then it's definitely bat. Okay? But it's not as obvious as that. Next, very, very valuable word, mashma. It's a very valuable word. Now, you can see the translation up there, but I'd like to break it down. So what's the root of the word? Shema. What does shema mean? To hear, right? To hear. The truth of the matter is that shema, although it means to hear, doesn't mean simply to hear, as in, for example, this background noise that I'm hearing. if I hear background noise, that's not called Shema. Shema is conscious or intentional hearing. Okay? So Shema means that I could be learning something from what I'm hearing because it's intentional. Mashma is to create that intention. Mashma, make it heard. In other words, it implies. So the word mashma means implies. Now, if you hear people who speak English or Yeshivish, right, which is people who mix in Yeshiva language into their English conversation, they will often use this word mashma in regular conversation. Okay, so it's mashma from what you're saying. they'll use it. It's like it becomes part of the vernacular. Okay, it's a very valuable word. Mashma implies. Okay, it means implies. It implies implication. All right. So now, before we can actually read the piece, the most important part of this piece is to understand the mechanism that the Gemorah is going to use. So the mechanism it's using, the mechanism that it's using is a kasha. The kasha is a direct challenge based on a source. Okay, so let's remind ourselves. Kashas could be direct or indirect. Kashas could be based on logic or a source. This is a direct challenge based on a source.
This pasuk that you're talking about.
We're going to use the word out of that pasuk as a direct challenge. So the source is the pasuk, or the word in the pasuk. We're going to use that as a direct challenge against what you just told me. What did you just tell me? You just told me that the average person could misunderstand the meaning of the word mitzasiyah, and they could think that mitzasiyah means to see rather than to have in your hands. Well, actually, I'm going to challenge if that is even a thing. So what's the mechanism I'm going to use? It goes like this. It's a two-part mechanism. The first part is a three-word phrase. Then you've got the statement that we're analyzing. And then you've got the word vaha, which introduces our problem with your statement. Okay? So let's see how it goes. Umi matzis amras. Could you say? That's the truth. Umi matzis amras. And could you say what you've just said? Okay? So what have you just said? You've just said that people will misconstrue mitzia to mean seeing. So I'm challenging that. Umi matzis amras. Could you say that? In other words, would people really believe, similar to what Charlie asked, would people really believe that just seeing something is enough reason to say I found it? But I'm not just saying that as an open-ended question. Do you think that's true? No. Verha. But I have a source that indicates that that can't be the way that people understand this word. Okay, so that's the mechanism we're going to be using. Okay, so any time that you have this phrase, Umi matzis amras, ... vaha, the mechanism is always an indirect challenge to what you've said. Did I say before direct challenge? Sorry. An indirect challenge to what you said, because you said X, but X can't be correct because of the information I have from a source.
Is that always a recipe of a kasha?
It's one of the recipes of a kasha.
They use the same words over and over again.
So they'll use for this kind of a kasha. This will be the key, that's why it's a key phrase. This will be the terminology that's used. How could you say that when I have evidence to the contrary? Evidence, not logic. Evidence to the contrary. Evidence means I have a source.
If this works out to be true, then what they said before is wrong.
Exactly. If this challenge cannot be responded to, then yes, what they said before is disqualified. And if what they said before is disqualified, then we're back to our original question. Because what they said before was answering our question. Our question was, why do you have to say kula shali after you say mitzasiyah? We gave an answer because you'll misunderstand mitzasiyah. Now I'm saying, who says you'll misunderstand mitzasiyah? If you can't respond to this, there goes your answer. The original question has to be addressed again. Okay? All right. So now let's see what the Gemorah is actually going to do.
But so the only reason that they will say I found it and it's mine, because there's another person that's saying that it's his.
Yes.
So the only saying it was that the one is claiming that it's his.
That's true. Yeah.
So then what is the problem?
What's the problem? The problem is exactly that. On what basis are you saying it's yours? That's exactly the problem. Okay? All right. Let's have a look inside. Omi matzis amras. Could you possibly say what you've just said, which was my mitzasiyah re'isiha? You've just said that people could misunderstand and say, what does mitzasiyah mean? It means I saw it first. So that was your whole answer. And that's why you believe that the Mishnah had to continue with the extra expression, kula shali, to clarify that. I'm saying nobody would ever think that. Me, Matzah, how could you possibly say, my Matzasiyah Reisiyah, that anybody would misinterpret the word Matzasiyah to mean, I saw it? Why am I so convinced that you can't say that? But Omar Ravnoi. So Ravnoi is one of the sages, and that's the sage. Ravnoi says umetzasa, the word umetzasa, which we've just seen in this other pasuk about lost items, right? Umetzasa, where it says if it was lost from somebody else, umetzasa, and you found it, it's really important for us to know because we said once you found it, you have to return it. So the question is, at which point are you considered to have found it? Meaning to say, at which point do you have the obligation to return it? Meaning to say, if you haven't returned it, you're breaking a law of the Torah. So at which point does that obligation begin? Says Rav Noi, de asai lidei mashma. The implication of mitzasa is de. What's de? Prefix de.
Not two.
No? What's that, Yaakov? No, I think you might have said it. It's just. Oh, no. Sorry, I thought you said something else. De is, the prefix de is. Sorry, I'm going to keep drilling these things in till, So prefix de, we have had it before. That, correct. So, you would have thought, not you would have thought, Rav Noi says, umetzasa, when the Torah says that you have found a lost object and now you're required to go track down the owner and return it, when is that? De, that, asa, now that word we've had already before, right? Asa we've had already. What does asa mean?
Ayin shin hey.
Aleph, Tov, Aleph.
You.
No, that's Aleph, Tov, Hey, Ata. This is Asa, this Aramaic. Aleph, Tov, Aleph. We had the word already once before.
How's ChatGPT with this?
Probably pretty decent. Okay? Alright, so Asa we said is to come. So de, that, Asai, it came. Le, what's le? To. What's yad? Hand. Le yadei, his hand. Da'asai le yadei mashma. Says Rav Noi, when the Torah says umetzasa, that you found a lost object, now you have to return it, that means you've actually got it in your hand. Until you take the object in your hand, you are not yet obligated to return it. In other words, Rav Noi, nobody challenges what he says, therefore it's obviously accepted across all halachic literature, says that the definition in the Torah of the word umatzasa, to find, means to hold. Now, you're trying to address the question, why did the Mishnah not satisfy itself with saying, the guy says I found it, but he also has to say, it's all mine. You said the reason for that is to avoid the misunderstanding that finding means seeing. Well, where would that misunderstanding even come from, considering that we have a clear verse in the Torah that says, found means it's in my hand. What more do you need? The Torah says it's in your hand. Why would anybody think differently to that? Why would the Mishnah consider that there's any legal grounds? Yes, you could get some Meshugana who thinks differently to the Torah. We don't care. The Torah has guidelines. The Torah says finding means it's in your hand. So if the Torah says finding means it's in your hand, that's where it begins and ends. Why do you imagine it differently?
Where's the Torah say that?
So you've got the verse. No, good point. So you got the verse. The verse says umetzasa, and you will find it. Rav Noi comments on that the definition of metzasa means it came to your hand. Nobody challenges him. That means that everybody acknowledges that that's what the Torah meant. If there were to be another opinion, good point. If there were to be another opinion, then we would have said, okay, we go with that other opinion. But there's no other opinion, right? This is it. He's the person who's attributed with having identified this translation. Nobody sees it differently. That's it. The word finding means holding.
But in your example, if you were to see the ox, you're not obligated to return it. You're holding the ox.
Well, you'd have to take the lead, and at that point you become obligated, or whatever the physical thing that's necessary, right? By this logic, yeah.
So is he agreeing with our proposition?
Not at all. Not at all. Again, Our proposition was the Mishnah needed to clarify what ownership is, because you would have thought the word matzasi means I saw. Says the Gemara, no. The word matzasi means I have it in my hand, because we've got evidence of that. So goodbye. There goes your theory. So we no longer use that surely as an answer for why it is that the Gemara had to add the words kula sheli. We're back to square one. Why did the Mishnah have to use the words kula sheli?
I guess they can challenge the word lost. So where the word lost by someone. That is a time frame to that.
Good question. I don't know if the time frame is relevant in this story, but technically yes. Technically, even an object which you are supposed to return, the Gemara later on is going to tell us that you're supposed to announce it over the course of 3 yontivs, and then beyond that, that's it. You can't do more than that.
What is the hypothesis that the Gemara presented?
So the hypothesis that the Gemara presented was, we think people misinterpret the word finding to mean seeing. Therefore, the Mishnah had to add the word kula sheli to clarify that finding is only considered finding when you have in your hand. Says the Gemara, I don't need your whole rigmarole. We already know this information. We already know that finding is once it's in your hand. So that can't be what these words kula sheli in the Mishnah are there to clarify.
So now we need to investigate what it will clarify. There's no wasted words. Right?
So now that's correct, exactly. So now we have 2 options. Either we can have a rebuttal to this challenge, and if that works, then our original suggestion holds, or we've got to find a new explanation. Those are our 2 choices right now. Well, the good news is we're going to be doing the former.
So, you said it's Rav Noah. Where do you see his name?
Where do you see his name? In the Gemara. Right there.
In the Gemara.
In the Gemara. In the Gemara. In the Gemara. Okay. All right. So the good news is, the good news is that the Gemara has a rebuttal, and the Gemara is able to illustrate that while you've made a really good point, you've also missed an important point. And in fact, you've missed the point of exactly what the Mishnah is doing, and therefore our original argument stays. So let's just have a look in the actual Gemara page for a second, just to see what it looks like. Okay, do you see that you've got the highlighted in red? Umi matzis amras v'ha. Do you see? That's in the Gemara. And now you've got the answer that's going to be, as you can see, built in four elements, basically. In, umihu, tani, and then de, which basically unpacks it. In other words, what that means is we're giving a complex response. It's not a direct response to say, no, that's not true because of X. It's a complex response. We have to explain that you've made a point, your point is valid, and yet our point is also valid. That's effectively what this answer is going to be. What's that?
What's that?
It's called an answer.
Complex answer.
It's called a complex answer, but it's correct.
Would that be an askafta now? Challenge to the...
It's not a challenge. It's not a challenge. It's a response. It's a response and it's a nice response, because effectively what this response says is you're right and you're right. And even though that's not really a good response in many cases, in this instance it's actually a perfect response. Okay? We're going to say you're right and you're right. Okay, so what does that mean?
Appeasing.
Okay? So, yeah, okay. So the technique that the Gemara is going to use over here, let's first start with a technique, then we'll go into the vocab. So the technique that the Gemara is going to use over here is built on these 3 key words. In, ... umihu, ... tane, ... which means like this. In, as you can see at the top, is yes. You see that? In means yes. Do you see that funny little symbol? Those like arrows going in opposite directions? That illustrates that this is one of those unique cases where the Aramaic word means the exact opposite of the Hebrew word. Ein in Hebrew means not, right? Or is not, right? And here, in means yes. It's almost the exact opposite. Ein is a negative in Hebrew and a positive in Aramaic. Okay, that's part of the reason why I think people pronounce it as in rather than ein, because they don't want to confuse everybody. Okay, so when I say in, what I'm saying is I acknowledge what you're saying and it's true. So that's the first part of this. That's why it's a complex answer. The first part of the answer is to say you are correct in your observation. The second part of the answer is mihu. What's the word mihu? It's over there. It's here on this page. It's on this page. Mihu means however. Mihu means however. When we were kids, there was a children's book that had a character called Mihu the detective. But that was based on the Hebrew. Mihu. Who is it? Right? Mihu in Aramaic means however. Okay, so I acknowledge what you're saying is accurate. However, our context is different. So your point was correct in your context. Our point is correct in our context. Therefore, therefore the Mishnah spoke in the way in which it did. Okay, does it make sense? Okay? Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're right in a particular context. We were discussing a different context, and that explains why our Mishnah took the approach that it took. Okay, let's just get some vocab over here. If you did not read the English translation of the word kara, in other words, if you had a look at the root, kuf reish aleph, what does the root kuf reish aleph mean? And it could have more than one meaning. To read, right? What else could it mean? That's what I hate. That's what I hate. But kuf reish aleph, what else could it mean besides to read? It could mean to call, right? Like the Baal Korah is the reader. But when you call somebody, it's also called koreh, that you call somebody. Okay, now if the root kuf reish aleph means to read, how do I get from that to scriptures? Because kra means the scripture. How do I get from reading to scripture?
Reading the Torah.
Right? Maybe I'm reading the Gemorah.
Reading the Torah.
I mean, you are right, but the question is why? Why? Okay, what do we call the two major areas of Torah? They each have a name, right? What are the two major areas of Torah? Correct. Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh. Torah Shebechsav means the written Torah, i.e. the scripture, and Torah Shebal Peh means the oral Torah. So, at the time of the Mishnah, what was there available to read? Only the scriptures. That's the only part that was available to read. So therefore, when we use the word kra, the text that we read, we're referring to the scriptures. Okay?
Scriptures as in Tanakh?
Tanakh. Okay, next word over here, Lamed Shin Nun, is the root for language. Okay? Lashon, language, like Lashon Hara, right? Then the Aramaic word nokat is a useful word. It means to take or to quote. The next root is both in Hebrew and in Aramaic. It's the same root in Hebrew and Aramaic. Ches Zayin Hey. C. Very good. Excellent. Exactly. And that's and that is like the Shabbos we had just a few weeks ago, which was called Shabbos Chazoin, the Shabbos of vision. Now in Aramaic we use the word chazi either to mean seeing, as in our case here, but sometimes the word chazi also means that something is suitable for a particular purpose. Okay, but that's not relevant to us today, so we'll leave it for now. And the last word we have to look at is again a word where the root in Hebrew and the root in Aramaic are almost exact opposites. Shin chof ches in Hebrew. What does it mean in Hebrew? To forget. Right? No, not shukayach. That's slang. Right? Lishkoach means to forget. Right? Shichacha is forgetfulness or forgetting. But in Aramaic, the same root, shin chof ches, means to find, which is the exact opposite, because it's the guy who forgot. He's the guy who lost the thing. And the person who finds it is the exact opposite, and yet the root is shin chof ches. Okay. So the basis of the Gemorah's answer is going to be this. You cannot compare the way people speak to the way the Torah speaks. What does that mean? That means that the Torah is the Word of God. The Torah is letter perfect. The Torah is designed where a word is supposed to teach us a whole, in this case, legal principle. People talk like people talk. People talk colloquially. In other words, the response that the Gemorah is going to give over here is, I agree with you 100%. When the Torah uses the word mitzasa, the Torah means that you've got it in your hand. Absolutely. But we're not describing a scenario where 2 Torah scrolls came to a court. We're describing a scenario where 2 people came to a court. And people often use expressions loosely. And so therefore there is a real possibility that a person will use the word found when he doesn't yet have it in his hand. So please don't quote the Torah to me and use that as an explanation of what's going to happen in the court. What's going to happen in the court is people are going to speak like people speak. We have to guide them to say that will be accepted in court, that will not be accepted in court. So that's basically going to be the principle of this piece. We have to still learn it inside, which I don't think we're going to squeeze it into the time we have now. So we actually have to learn the text inside. But at least we've made an important switch, just in terms of knowing that, yes, you can quote a source to prove a point. You cannot quote the language of a source to comment on the language of people. That doesn't make sense. None of us speaks like the Torah speaks, realistically. Okay, so that's an important observation.